And now let's turn to another big topic that's going to be taking up a lot of space here at the end of this session. We're talking energy legislation with Senator Bill Cunningham. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We've talked even earlier this session before about some priorities you have for Illinois' energy grid, one of them being battery storage for a lot of the clean energy sources that we've been building up in the state over the past several years. Let's just start there. Is that going to be a priority for this omnibus bill we're expecting to come in the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, we definitely need to take some sort of action, and I'll tell you why. This summer, Illinois ratepayers, electrical consumers, are going to get an unpleasant surprise in their energy bills. They're going to see increases, and they are directly attributed to the regional transmission organizations that manage the grids, two separate multi-state grids that Illinois is a part of. They are going to increase our bills to pay for what we call capacity. Capacity is what power plants provide at the highest times of demand. So like in the summer on a 90-degree day, everyone's air conditioning is running, more energy usage. We have to pay a premium to these regional transmitting organizations for energy at that time. They do an auction to establish the price, both a southern Illinois grid and a northern Illinois grid, and both have come back with much higher rates. We're going to have to pay for that. It's largely out of our control. So what we have to look at is, what do we control as Illinois legislators related to the electrical bills our constituents pay, and what can we do to lower pressure? There are two immediate ways we can do that. One is with battery storage, by incentivizing the development of facilities that can take in electricity at a time when the demand is low and the price is high, and then dispatch it, store it there, hold it, and then dispatch it at times when demand is high and the price is high. And that will have the natural effect of suppressing the prices. So we can do that by incentivizing developers in the state to build batteries. And that's something we really want to accomplish this year. Another thing we want to do is lower demand, and one of the ways to do that is to promote energy efficiency. So we're working with the utilities, with Ameren and ComEd, and the environmental community and consumer advocates to try to figure out a way to incentivize the utilities to spend more money on energy efficiency programs, which costs money up front, but in the back end lowers demand and lowers prices. So those are things we can control as legislators, and that's what we're going to focus on the next couple of weeks here in Springfield.
Things like battery storage, incentives for building battery storage fields. What's the ramp to getting to those things being functional? So is this something that we could see multiple years of these kinds of increases?
That unfortunately is the problem. This is not something we can flick the switch on and have happen tomorrow. It's something that's going to take a couple of years to put in place. So as a result of that, we will not see an immediate reduction in those capacity prices I talked about. But we anticipate these capacity prices to remain high and go even higher over the next couple of years because of increased demand for electricity. So we have to start right now on these efforts, like battery development, like energy efficiency, so we can keep these increases we can keep our bills level and prevent continued increases going into the next 4 or 5 years.
As with any energy debate in this building, it's very multifaceted,
yes.
And that's what we're expecting this final bill to be. Tell me a little bit about more of what's on the table. Are we talking, maybe, are there any potential revisions to past clean energy policy that we've had? Is there any work to be done on nuclear?
Yes.
A lot of Republicans are still focusing on natural gas as a potential fix to the issue. What could potentially be a part of this package?
So I think there are a lot of very wonky, detailed things related to the way the state procures funding for renewable projects that you can see there'll be some tinkering to hopefully get renewable projects on the grid quicker. You mentioned nuclear. I think there is building momentum here in the State House right now for relaxing a nuclear moratorium that has been in place in the state for a number of years. Back in the 60s and 70s and into the early 80s, the state invested a lot in nuclear power. Nuclear power kind of went out of fashion because of 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl, but we've seen the safety record of nuclear plants improve, and this recognition that nuclear generation is carbon free, so does not harm the environment the way coal and gas generation does. So there is increased interest in increasing Illinois' advantage when it comes to nuclear generation, and we may do that by at least relaxing the cap on new development that might let Constellation, which is the company that happens to own all of our nuclear plants, develop a new reactor at one of their existing plants. This would be a big help to addressing the increased demand we're seeing for electricity that is largely driven by data centers right now. It's not a panacea. Developing a nuclear reactor is very expensive. We want to make sure that if it is done, it is paid by what is creating this new demand, the data centers, and not by ratepayers.
Well, that's an interesting point, because when the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act was passed, the advent of AI, data centers,
Yep.
sucking up so much of this energy, was not really considered. This was the new element. This is what caused this increase in energy need. And I'm just curious, did Illinois jump too quickly into that market, or was that inevitable given the way that technological trends are going? We've seen Governor Pritzker especially welcome these businesses in.
Yes. Yes.
Was that poorly timed, or was that just the way that everything ended up going?
I don't think anyone imagined the level of growth that has occurred. As you said, when we debated CEJA, when we negotiated the bill, no one talked about data centers. We had heard of them, but no one ever saw them becoming an issue. They've become a gigantic issue, and it's because of AI. We're seeing a shift to quantum computing that eats up even more energy. The development of cryptocurrencies is also extremely energy intensive. We knew there was going to be an increased demand for electricity. No one knew it would be at these levels. And we have to react to that. And I think the answer is we want to welcome data centers into the state because they create jobs, construction jobs. They also pay a lot of property taxes to our local governments, particularly our schools. That's something we need to keep our property taxes down, is have new businesses come in and contribute to those property tax levies. It will create property tax relief for the rest of us. So we want to welcome data centers, but we want to do it in a way where they're not leaching too much power from the system that is going to affect whether or not the lights go on. So that's why ramping up generation is really important. We can use nuclear, we can use renewable. We might also have to see a delay in the closure of some of the gas plants that are scheduled to close in 2030 and 2035. We don't know about that yet. We'll see if we can ratchet up the pace of renewable development, but that's something we might have to look at in the future.
In one of your previous answers, you talked about getting renewable sources on the grid quicker, and that for people at home might not realize, you can build the windmills, you can build the solar fields, but getting it connected to the larger grid has been where the issue has really lied recently. The transmission lines that connect it to the larger grid really, when those aren't there, it isolates these sources to very small areas of the state that get to benefit from that energy produced. A lot of that is on those regional operators that you already discussed. And if the regional operators can just say, we're going to charge more, and they don't have that level of accountability that, maybe your local group, your local energy provider, an Ameren, for instance, or something has, or even the lawmakers in this building have, where does the pressure come from to speed that process up at the regional level, especially considering Illinois has a much more progressive view on energy policy than a lot of its neighbors and a lot of members of these regional operators?
Yes. You raise an outstanding point, Cole. Again, we very much have our hands tied by these regional transmitting organizations, two of them multi-state organizations that operate in the state. And it is frustrating. I think what we're going to see, it's a little bit late for this year, but it likely will be a discussion in the General Assembly next year, is about the future of our membership in these RTOs. Is that really the best thing for the state? There are other states that have created their own state transmitting organizations, New York, Texas, and California. They've done it with some mixed success, but I think we're going to need to study that and consider, is that the way for future for the state? The state of Illinois at this time produces 130% of the energy we consume. We are an exporter of energy. I think we have to consider, is that the best deal for those of us in Illinois? Or does it make more sense for us to take a look at maybe setting up our own transmission organization? There is no easy answer to that question because there are potential negative implications from that. So I think it's something that deserves some study and consideration. I think that's something we'll do next year.
So the energy export, I mean, the fact that Illinois is an energy exporter, is that going to change in the next few years, as we see data centers ramping up? And I guess we've talked about the way that energy usage is going to increase. Is that going to change? Is Illinois going to continue to be an exporter?
It's a good question. And I think it's hard to say right now. I think if we see the renewable development that's in what we call the queue, the line, we have a 5, 6, 7-year line for these renewable projects to get on that multi-state grid. If that continues to be delayed, then there is some question about whether or not the state can produce the energy we need. In December of this year, as a result, this was something that was required in CEJA, the big energy bill we passed in 2001, the ICC, the Illinois Commerce Commission, the State Environmental Protection Agency, and the State Power Agency are going to put out a joint report. And they are it's called a Resource Adequacy Report. And they're going to look at all these things we're talking about, and they're going to make a recommendation back to the legislature and tell us whether or not we are going to have the resource adequacy, the generation adequacy we need for the next 5 years. And I think we will take that report to heart, and it may create momentum for making some of the changes we just talked about. Maybe to the RTOs, maybe we talk about forming our own RTO, maybe delaying the closure of some of the gas plants that are scheduled to close in 2030 and 2035. We want to improve our environment. We want to stop the pollution that these plants are causing, but we also want the lights to stay on. So that's a balance we're going to have to strike over the next couple of years, and I think that report that comes out at the end of this year will really set the roadmap for the next 5 years.
All right, well, I look forward to taking a look at that. But Senator Cunningham, thank you so much for taking the time. We'll be right back.